So, hi everyone. I'm here with Martin Neilson, and he's the co-founder of Mega AI. And Martin, you're in the agent AI kind of space, really. And I know you've sort of been doing sort of like basically using AI agents to replace telephone calls.
Yeah. So I'm not replacing the human phone calls, but I am enhancing the human operators today with more relevant conversation and not to do too many repetitive tasks.
Mm.
So
So, what are you seeing, I suppose, in terms of rollout and adoption of that kind of technology? I mean, so absolutely right. So, rather than replacing in terms of enhancing it, I mean, so is that what people are looking for? I mean, do people make the same kind of mistake that I would make in terms of like, well, this is going to be like a shoe in just to like as a replacement for it, and you're now seeing something different? I mean, what are people in the market finding interesting?
I think there was a dream when you heard this AI thing coming around a
Mm,
year, 1.5 years ago, that it would be able to replace humans. So some of the markets are very keen of hearing, could I replace my humans with AI? And luckily, most of the markets see it as a part of their omnichannel strategy, where it's
mm,
not replacing, but enhancing human potential and dialogues, etc. So I think there is a market shift in general, and especially in the collection and order to cash
mm,
industry, that how can we bring more that will probably always looking out for more tools to your omnichannel strategy.
mm.
So I think that there's a time now that there's a lot of focus on how can it help.
And how much of it is sort of driven by, I mean, the whole title around AI has been a hot topic, right? And it feels like some people are very keen on just like anything AI. I mean, is it that, or is it really coming out of the pandemic in terms of capacity as well? Because it doesn't have to necessarily replace calls. It can also just add to your capacity for some of the simpler calls as well. What's generating the excitement, do you think?
Yeah, I think you actually was spot on that it's also the capacity that you didn't have the capacity to do it. I'm coming from the outbound and I've been running call center, a big call center for 20 years, and staff are expensive is one thing, but they have a very high burnout when they do
Mm,
repetitive tasks. So I think that's a big thing more actually, that how can I extend my humans
mm,
staying longer in my company? How
mm,
can I give them more complex assignments?
mm,
So you can take also, of course, lower valuable accounts and handle them that you wouldn't be able to handle before.
mm.
But in general, it's actually I see a more trend of how can I also extend the pleasure of working in this industry for
Yeah,
my human agents and complement them. Uh, And you are right, AI is there's a lot AI strategy. What is that? And I think it's a lot of things. So I'm
yeah.
just a part of it in Mega where we do the AI voice bots, but we see AI in collection systems and when you are sending emails out, doing them by AI generated, etc. So I think there is a need in the market actually to maybe be more concrete. What is it you want with your AI strategy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
not just saying I want to have AI in there somewhere. I know I need it, but
And I mean, the other trend that we've seen, particularly in the collections world, has been sort of like digital transformation, I suppose, in terms of like using portals, using websites, using
yeah,
apps to service customers.
yeah.
Where do you think the AI voice, but I suppose just voice in general, and then AI voice being a section of that, sort of where does that sit within that sort of ecosystem, that sort of
Yeah.
transformation that's kind of happened?
Think it's in two places. I have a lot of talks with collection systems right now and self-service portal, and there is
Mm,
like a whole narrative, I think, in general of how do you collect money today, that you want people are more self-service today. People
mm,
want to be self-serviced. And there is also a change in dialogue that you are more polite and more empathic
mm,
way of doing it, why the self-service portals are also winning right now and is a big game changer, I think. So I think the whole industry are changing now for being a little old-fashioned in some way
mm,
and now embracing new technology, but also embracing that people thinks different
mm,
today. And the younger generation are growing, which are used to other type of channels. So
mm,
for me, AI sits on top of the funnel. When you talk about AI voice bots, it sits on top of the funnel, doing the initial calls, making sure that we are talking with the right persons. And as soon as there's coming a dispute or more complex conversation, it should be transferred down to a human agent. So I think it's placed there, but also I see a lot of companies using it of when people are calling in to their existing call centers or companies,
mm.
that the first line of support could be by an AI agent. And when there is a need for more complex dialogue, it should be transferred to a human.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, one of the concerns that must get raised, and I've heard raised with other sort of AI bot or AI kind of voice kind of discussions, is really around how do you make sure that there's accuracy in terms of what's being said, because you've got it's not just one system, it's now one system that represents multiple versions of agents before they actually get through to someone. How do you allay concerns around that?
I think first of all, there's a whole quality insurance that are quite important. Let me give you an
Mm,
example. I'm sitting in Denmark, has nothing to do with my company, but there was a big taxi company here who released AI bots in Denmark.
mm,
And then there was a huge problem because 30% of all the answers were wrong.
mm.
And then you have a bad experience with
Yeah, yeah,
AI.
yeah.
It's the same when I'm calling my telephone company. I'm getting always a bad experience. So then it's a bad experience. So I think that there's a quality insurance that you need to make sure of. That's a big part of our company to make sure that you train the AI like you would train a human. And also why we are normally training our bots on our clients' old previous data and recorded
Mm,
data, etc. But there's a big quality insurance that you want to make really sure, especially when you are talking about AI, that the quality check and the experience that the customer gets should be even more better than when you're doing it with a human,
mm,
because there is like Eh, you have already your guards a little bit up regarding that. So that's a big thing. And this taxi company needed to roll their solution back again. And the reason was that they actually trained it on human calls where 30% of the answers were wrong when a
okay.
human gave it to a human. So you need quality insurance and making sure that you test it a lot. And that's a part of our process, of course. But I think that's a part. And then making sure that you are taking data from an existing system that you have today and taking that data, pushing back again and having these integrations between AI and your existing system to make correct approach to clients.
Yeah, and I suppose how does that complexity change between inbound and outbound? So typically, inbound calls can be quite complex because they can be talking about anything, right? So it's almost like a bit of like you're on the back foot in terms of answering it. Whereas
Yeah,
outbound calls, does that sort of narrow down the complexity in terms of, and I suppose the concerns around making sure things are accurate as well? Because you're making an outbound call, you're typically calling about something, and
yeah,
they're almost like the guardrails are narrower to a certain
yeah.
extent.
The inbound is more simple. I think every conversation needs to be very skill trained and you need to make sure the quality is on a really high level. But for sure, when you are doing an outbound call, you are doing a more unwanted call where
Yeah,
inbound
yeah,
people
yeah.
have taken a choice, of course, to call in. So there is a skill set there where the conversation, and then there's a whole complexity of building dialers and dialing out and making sure you are following regulations. There's a lot of regulations regarding both AI in
Mm,
outbound calls, but in general of calling and dialing people, there's a lot of
mm,
regulation that is quite difficult. For us, it haven't been a problem because we worked and used to build dialers for 15 years, but that's a big thing and a big difference from inbound to outbound. Is more complex to do the outbound, and you need to be more skilled in what people you are calling with outbound. What voices are you using? What kind of route do you go with? An example in the UK market now, there's a lot of talk about vulnerable clients. If you are a
mhm,
vulnerable client that you call, I'm now building different filters into my bots that can listen. So if I can hear that you are a vulnerable client, I need
mm,
to report that back somewhere. But I also probably need to take another route with the
mm,
client. And that's, I think, one of the big difference from inbound to outbound, that you need to be a lot more skilled
mm,
in the sensitive stuff, like vulnerable clients is a great example. Imagine you do outbound call and you didn't have respect for a vulnerable client. You would probably do more harm than you would
mm,
do good. So again, that put extra check mark of what you need to
mm.
assure when you are doing outbound operation. And there are your whole brand to protect, no matter what kind of outbound, if you do it with humans or AI, there is a brand protection of creating a more good or qualified experience that I think you need to do with inbound, where people actually calling in and just want to have a problem solved. Uh,
I suppose the complexity on the inbound where I was going was if you have an inbound call, it could be on anything, right? You don't know where the conversation is going to go. Whereas on the outbound,
yeah,
then it's more targeted. But you're absolutely right in terms of the vulnerability piece is different, isn't
yeah.
it? The
But
dialing piece is different. All of those things is outbound complexity versus
yeah,
inbound complexity, which
but
is
you're
not no
right.
different, right?
I had a client the other day calling our inbound lines for one of our clients, and he went in a completely other direction. I
Yeah,
was saying, I'm in this city. Can you help me about traveling? Help,
yeah.
etc., etc. But with AI, the good thing is actually you need to control it. You
Mm,
know, where can it not go? So when
mm,
there is an inbound line, you need to be very strict in all matters where the client are going out in question that are not related to the case. We recommend client to transfer the call to a human. So
mm.
that is the really big collaboration I see between AI and humans. When it's going to be too complex or out of order, a human should be taking over, mostly out of a customer service and how you handle your customers.
And I suppose the other piece that's out there in terms of outbound, which has been a technology been around for a while, is I suppose the outbound IVR. In terms of like the automated calling and sort of like selection that then goes through. What's the difference between doing it and the benefits of doing it using an AI bot versus just a more sort of automated kind of system that
Yeah.
you see at least anyway?
For me, coming from doing over 15 years in my outbound call centers, like 8,000 new sales a month on behalf of my clients, like
Mhm,
telco insurance clients, etc., uh, is a lot about quality. Like that was
mm,
why I was really provoked when people said AI are replacing humans because you cannot. A human dialogue is. I have trained thousands of sellers
mm,
and I know what it takes to make a good seller, and it don't work overnight. They need to be trained, and it's the same here. So an IVR system, it can only push one, push nine. You cannot have a conversation. It cannot be empathic. It cannot understand your situation. You cannot have a skilled and long conversation. It's more one, two, three. And I don't think that works. And I also hear from the market it hasn't been working because
mm,
if you if I call you, Chris, today, I have 8 seconds to convince you only 8 seconds to convince you to take this call. That's the maximum. And you need to feel that I'm approaching with your good dialogue, where this is a good experience. No matter if you're a debtor or you are somebody you need to sell something to, you need to create that good experience and personalized experience as
mhm,
close to what a human can do. That's why we are training all our AI bots based on live calls from our customers. So
mm,
in general, the bots perform like the agents are doing.
mm.
You cannot ask an IVR system to do that, and that's why it's not creating that experience.
So that's just really around getting to the really important piece as quickly as possible, just like a human would,
Yeah.
rather than having to go through menus or those
Yeah.
kind of things, which is frustrating for
It's
for customers. So,
frustrating.
yeah,
Like back to the history, I'm calling UC, my Danish telephone company is the biggest one in Denmark. It's an IVR bot, and I don't know how many times it pushed 19, then I'm coming to a wrong department and I'm
yeah,
hanging up. And so now I lost the purpose.
yeah.
I called in here to get a problem fixed, and you try to do that, and you're not doing that. Uh,
I mean, specifically for collections or for sales, I suppose. I mean, how far down that sort of negotiation kind of route do you think you can go in terms of AI bots, as you'd call them?
you can go a long way. I had a 16-minute conversation with my bot
Mm,
the other
yeah,
day where I was really, really rude and I was really complex and
yeah,
I had disputes. And because I have a client that wants us to handle dispute handling, my recommendation is I don't think you should do dispute handling. I think it's a human interaction. I agree when you have low valuable clients that owe couple of €100, you could do some part of it. Hey,
mm,
can you please send in your
mm,
payment receipts or whatever, whatever. But as when the conversation gets too complex, I would always transfer it, not because the AI cannot handle it, but it's also about what are the humans, our race, what are
mm,
we ready for?
mm,
And I think there's a time now where we are today here in October, November, December next year, maybe. I don't know where we are in a year. It's
mm,
not because the AI cannot have a 40-minute conversation with you and handle your disputes,
mm,
etc. But I also think there is a place when it is all about having a good relationship with your customers or debtor and making them pay and
mm,
convert the highest possible
mm,
amount when you're doing
mm,
these activities. And that's why I think you should push it down to an agent when there is disputes or
mm.
a little bit more complex disputes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you're very much thinking of it as almost like that initial contact. Maybe someone can make a payment, or they can do an initial sort of flag around things like vulnerability as well.
Yeah.
Doing that very initial sort of 30 seconds before it then gets triaged and then off to the more complex cases, then also actually go through to an agent.
Yeah. And you can say installment plans it can offer my customer. For our customers, we are running thousands of calls every day on behalf of our
Mm,
customers. And they are normally 1 to 2 minute conversations and then they're
mm,
being transferred down. But I think it's more out of a human element again, and it's, where it's so new for a lot of people.
mm,
And I think there's again a group of people we can see when we call younger people, they don't want to talk to a human. They sometimes say, I don't want to talk to a human. Can we
yeah,
fix it? Yes, we
yeah,
can. I think there's a
yeah,
time and place for everything. But you can remove 60% of the waste time and the time that humans shouldn't be used. So imagine just to take 60% away of the time that were not spent well by you humans, and then let them take the more complex assignments like dispute handling. And that's also a part of why people want to stay in the collection companies, because they don't burn out that well, because they actually like to communicate about more complex things.
and I suppose the way you're sort of explaining it is don't think about it as being the entire call. We're thinking about it as being the part of the call. So it can be
Yes.
the initial part of the call,
Yes.
sort of almost like blended with the agent in the latter part of the call, rather than it being
Yes.
here's a complete call replacement sort of thing. So
Yeah.
and that sort of like hybrid approach is where we're going to concentrate the agent on where they're really good and do some of the easier stuff in the machine to a certain extent.
In my call centers, my sales industry, my staff days, after 6 months, they left because it was too
Mm,
hard. It was repetitive task. Are you the right person? Imagine to take that away.
mm,
And if I could extend them for a year more being
mm,
there because they didn't burn out, that's actually where the real value come in.
mm,
And
and
of course, now you can, it's just a part of your omnichannel. As you said, you do phone calls, you do emails, you're sending WhatsApp and email. So it's just a part of that, a new
mm.
thing that you can now add into the equation.
And what about multilingual, right, as well? Because that surely has to be one of the things that can be potentially a big benefit in terms of, obviously you've got English, you'll have Danish. You can also switch necessarily partway through the call if
Yeah.
you have another, if you have French, for example, partway through the call because you're a French person living in Denmark. I don't know. So whatever it be, how does that multilingual aspect kind of work?
And you're right. That's actually some of the bigger thing. It's actually coming all the way down to accents. I'm in Denmark. We are what, 5.5 million people in total
Mm,
here. But when I'm calling the other side of Denmark and I'm from Copenhagen, I
right.
convert half of what a person from that area would do. So there's dialects, local dialects that are difficult to hire people
Mm,
sometimes to do. And then you're right. Then there is, I don't understand English or the language. I'm actually coming from that country. So if you're thinking about conversion, again, actually, there's a case in UK now where you are the company collecting money from the government for small companies that have missing taxes and VAT. And that's a good example. They actually want to pay, but they
mm,
don't understand the legalization and they don't
mm,
speak English.
mm,
So when you call them up, they don't understand unless you could say, hey, you want me to change in another language, then I can
mm.
pass you over to my French talking bot colleague
Yeah.
or my German talking bot colleague, and then you can go in that direction. So language, no problem in all languages, accents also. And it actually have a lot to do with also in UK, when you call people over 40 that are women, you convert a lot better if you're using an English school teacher voice
Mm,
for an older lady. That
mm,
don't work to the young people. So
mm,
those elements are very difficult sometimes to do with your human staff. And
mm.
there's also, of course, a benefit here that you
Yeah.
will be able to add that service element in to the conversation.
Every time we have some of this new technology comes up, there's usually like new insights or new nuances we need to have. So different accents are different kind of personas in terms of collections and the sort of those things. I mean, because we knew a little bit about accents as an example. Certain regional accents are better than other regional accents, but now it's getting down to the individual, isn't it? So yeah, I imagine if you're a school teacher and you're collecting against someone who's just recently left school, then probably goes down less well than it would if it was someone who's more familiar, I
Yeah,
suppose.
it would for
Yeah,
sure. And again, age difference, there's also a way to communicate to younger people and
yeah,
communicate to older people if you want to convert and create that experience.
yeah.
Uh, and what I love with the collection industry was that all collection companies or internal companies, they are treating their debtors as customers. And if
Mm.
you want to treat your debtors as customers and have that approach, then you should be all up for giving that experience.
And when obviously you're based in Denmark, but obviously out in Europe as well as the UK. I mean, how do you find the different markets in terms of level of adoption or level of interest? It'd be quite interesting to hear a bit of a compare and contrast, given sort of what your background's been, particularly being across all the markets. I mean, are some markets keener than others, and where's the
Yeah.
hesitation versus not?
UK market is super keen
Mm,
on it. That's our biggest market right now. US is, of course, a huge market for us. We have a mega North American team
mm,
also over there. And you can say they are very adaptable. I think the Scandinavian market is the less adaptable because
Mm,
this is so new for us to
mm,
handle. We are so service minded. And here I can give you an example that one of our customers, when they send out a letter, the first morning you have a green chocolate, and the next one you have a yellow one, and
mm,
the third letter a red one. But
mm,
it's very polite. So
mm,
they are more scared of putting this into motion, where the UK market, US market, they are very in front of this, and so adapting is very fast.
mm,
I also see the German market is normally a little bit more slower, but we have customers also in Germany. But UK for sure the biggest market, in US regulation-wise, UK is a little more difficult than US, but still not as difficult as the European
mm,
regulations. So the European regulations are very, very sharp in this,
mm,
where the UK and US, there is almost no regularization
mm.
around it.
Yes, so certainly some of the EU call center regulations can be quite tricky, but on the collections side, I mean, the UK has been quite strict on the pure sort of collections regulation piece. That's the way it sort of struck me to a certain extent. But I know there's regulations, for example, in some of the markets around what you can outsource, when you can't, to call, when you can call. And that from a call center point of view, that was quite
Yeah.
tough, wasn't it?
But it is tough, and there is a lot of compliance in general,
Mm,
which is normally I used to have two compliance companies are building KYC and
mm,
anti-money laundering software before, whistleblower software for before. So compliance is a big thing.
mm,
You need to be compliant and have the different kind of certifications. You need to be adapting to, yeah, how do you dial? And there's, of course, legalization when you can call, what you can call. And a good thing for the general and the permission based in general, all collection companies have permission to call already.
mm,
And again, I think that's a huge difference. If you are being cold called by a bot to sell you a mobile phone, you would
mm,
not, you would hang up. I think I would hang up. But
mm,
if I was called in that situation by a bot and I knew that I had a relationship with this company, I would actually rather talk to a bot
mm,
because it's an embarrassing situation in general to owe money to somebody. So I think that's why there is this sweet spot. I don't think these AI bots would work in all kind of industry, but it worked really fine here. And because a lot of the companies have previous permission to do IVR calls,
mm,
they are allowed to really to do these calls also now.
mm.
And then again, there's a difference. If you are calling your customer 10 times a day with an AI, which is possible, you would probably get bad reputation.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's also how to use it in a way that makes sense. I just actually tried a drill where we sent that SMS out before we call them saying, hey, we will call you soon.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot of things to protect you against the law, but also to make that you are actually doing what you are supposed to do, actually, again, give that good experience. And that
Mm,
makes sense that you need to treat people in the right way and not mass bomb them with calls, etc. So I
yeah.
think
Well, it's interesting how the
common sense.
technology yeah, how the technology sort of gets adopted and like cultures as well. We sort of adapt to it. I mean, I just remember back to online and we were always I remember we were turning off paper statements. Remember paper statements? You get those from
Yeah.
the bank and now they're
Yeah.
all getting turned off and there was resistance around that and we sort of the culture kind of changes to get more used to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Over time. So I wonder if that's going to sort of like change adoption rates. I think even now it feels like it's sort of changing what you're kind of
Yeah.
saying, but
Yeah.
maybe not all the way yet.
No, I think there's a time for humans to get used to this also and to adopting it into. But again, it's more and more. It's going so fast. Like when the internet came, we were also, wow, what's happening now?
Yeah.
But the difference from here to when the internet came and the .com wave came, this is going really fast.
Yeah.
In the AI environment, every week we went to new levels. So I think we will get more and more used to. When I go to the supermarket today, I'm not buying with a human anymore. When I'm going to a restaurant, there's a little bot coming over to me, some
Mm,
restaurants, and for me, it was quite weird in the beginning, but now I think, oh, yes, it's the norm. So I think it goes faster than we think, actually,
yeah.
where people are getting adapted to it. But again, I think it's the situation where you use it. If I was cold called by somebody in a sales situation, I don't think I would appreciate. But if I call my dentist to book a time, it would be fine to talk with an
Mm.
AI.
But in some ways, it puts a premium on the human interaction you do have. So when you do have a human interaction, sometimes you'll crave to have the human interaction because that's the right thing to do. And I was using the example a little bit around handmade products versus mass-produced products back in the day of mass production. And so everything was done by hand. Now we have mass production where it's all done by robots on a factory line. And we like that. It's good quality product. It's much more reasonable. But there's still a point there where you actually want something that's handmade. In fact, you'll pay a premium for it because you want to have that premium interaction. It's the same with a shop as well. You really want to have that premium human interaction. In fact,
Yes.
you'll go out of your way to find it.
Yeah, you're right. And again, I was approached a couple of months ago by a huge company that has a fashion brand. They want us to collect money that were more than 10,000 euros per
Mhm.
collection. I said, please use humans. That your
Yeah,
premium brand, there's a need for humans here. And I
yeah.
think again, as you said, also there is just where we need to have that human interaction. And there's some purchase, some customers, some products where it don't fit in now, where it can fit into some part of the process, but not take the whole process. So thing is different business for business. And also is it business to business customer you are serving, or is it consumer customers? And
Mhm.
it's not only about the collection part, there can be other in order to cash processes where it fits very well in your general process of
Yeah.
collecting money.
Obviously, this technology, I suppose, uses, prompt to text and and then converts, and we've got text to voice, haven't we? Do you think we'll ever get to having text to video? So
Yeah.
we'll have, I mean, you look at some of the new text to video demos that have come out, and they're looking very convincing, and we could be having this almost like text to video kind of conversation. Do you think we'll get there? I mean, do you think that will be on your roadmap? We'll be having this conversation in maybe not even 5 years' time, maybe 3 years' time or 2 years' time.
It's
What do you think?
scary. I know a Danish guy. They're London based now. There's a company called Synthesia, and
Mm,
Synthesia is doing AI avatar bots where
mm,
you can write text, and
mm,
then the bots have
mm,
there's an AI avatar sitting there speaking. I asked Victor long time ago, saying, when do you think it would be possible
yeah,
for my bots to call up to a debt and arrange a meeting about a debt situation, and on the Teams meeting like you and me have now,
yeah,
it's an AI avatar of me,
yeah,
you are speaking with, etc. And he said, yeah, 6, 7 months.
yeah.
And that's scary on a whole nother level. So yeah, I think that's again what we didn't see before when we have revolutionizing things happening in this field. It's not 5 years. It's more or less months we are
Mm,
talking about before things are possible. I had a meeting with a guy a couple of weeks ago.
mm,
He had an avatar of him
yeah,
on a meeting, a deep
yeah,
fake avatar, and I talked with that. And
yeah,
then I had another meeting with the real guy. I couldn't see the difference,
yeah,
but actually the avatar of him were more skilled than
yeah,
him because
yeah,
it knew everything about what he wanted to talk about.
yeah.
So I feel it actually quite scaring sometimes how fast it go, but I'm in this industry, so I still I'm finding it scary
Well,
what's
I mean, to
happening.
your point, it's whether the culture actually catches up as well, right? So if we're finding it scary, then we're probably moving faster than we're comfortable.
Yeah.
And the human beings have a certain speed, don't we, sometimes? And we can only move
Yes.
so fast, right? So we have to wait for time
Yes.
for us as humans to catch up, maybe
We
to a certain
that
extent.
I think is the big thing here, and I think it's a clever thing, and I think it's healthy to think like that. There is an ethical part in this
Mm,
that you need to be aware of. I think when you work in this AI industry, that
mm,
there is an ethical part to take in consideration also, and that's why we have been very keen in our world to say it's about collaboration with humans. I think
mm,
there is an ethical responsibility amongst the world, the leaders, the legalization people who do the legalization, us that works with it, to make sure that the world can follow. We also have potential job loss,
mm,
and that's not a problem normally because normally people have time to adapt and
mm.
re-educate themselves. So it's never a problem. Humans are super skilled at that.
Yeah,
But here it goes so fast. So I can be a little bit worried sometimes if we are moving too fast in it, we will lose human jobs, that we will
yeah,
not be able to train them up in other positions.
yeah,
So I think there is a wider responsibility amongst
yeah.
the industry and government level.
So if you look out over the next couple of years, where do you think we'll be both in terms of adoption and I suppose then in terms of the technology? Is it a steady rollout and just going to see greater adoption? We just got to bide our time to a certain extent in terms of like it will start rolling out more and more, and it's really around understanding the technology. What's your view of the future?
I think that AI will take over a lot
Mm,
of tasks in the future, and I think there will be a need of replacing
mm,
or re-educate your people to other positions. I
mm,
think we will see automate. We see it now. Automated supermarkets, no humans being
mm,
call centers. There's no need for them
mm.
anymore. You can always see what Elon Musk and Tesla. He released a taxi the other day that, and they
Yeah,
say in 2 years it will drive better than a human, and it will be
yeah,
legal.
yeah,
So imagine all the jobs there in that
yeah,
industry, taxi, transport industry, etc., etc.
yeah,
But I think it will go that way. I think it will go faster than we think. And I think that it will replace a lot more also what we are feeling comfortable in as normal humans. But again, the cost is 10% of the humans to
Yeah.
doing, and we can see now that is more efficient.
Mm,
We actually convert better on some of our assignments that a human would
mm,
be doing. And that's also scary. It's good for us in
mm.
our industry, but it's also scary. So I think that it will go faster than we think. And I think it will be replacing a lot of jobs
Yeah.
as we go.
But I think it will adjust so you have pockets of human interaction just becomes more human to a certain extent and more
Yeah,
sort of like personal, right? So I think there'll be that sort of change that sort of flows through.
you could use it on another level there, which
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think is super positive.
yeah. Well, Martin, thanks very much for making the time. I really appreciate it. It's a super fascinating area. It's a super interesting sort of development that's kind of going on. So really appreciate making the time. Thanks very much.
Of course, Chris, you're more than welcome. And thank you for having me here. It was really nice to talk with you.